The girl's scream hit a frequency that made every dog on Amherst Lane pull against its leash. She was 7 years old, standing barefoot on a sidewalk 12 feet from her own front door, and the sound coming out of her was not crying. Crying has rhythm. This was one sustained note, a sound her body produced because her mind had left the building, because she was watching her father pressed flat against hot pavement, with his wrists locked behind his back, while a police officer stood over him with one boot planted 6 inches from his ear. The father was wearing swim trunks, a white t-shirt soaked through with pool water, no shoes. His pool bag had been emptied onto the sidewalk beside him, and its contents lay scattered in the sun. A children's book with a mermaid on the cover, a bottle of sunscreen, a pair of green swim goggles sized for a child's face, a granola bar, half-eaten, 3 patrol cars now, 6 officers. For a man in wet swim trunks who had been carrying his daughter on his shoulders 90 seconds before the first cruiser pulled up. The girl screamed, and no one moved toward her. 12 hours earlier, that same sidewalk held nothing but Saturday morning. Solomon Keene was the kind of man who measured flour by weight because volume was imprecise, and imprecision in pancakes was, in his words, an injustice the Constitution could not remedy. Every Saturday at 6:45, he stood in his kitchen in bare feet and basketball shorts, with a digital scale on the counter and a cast-iron griddle heating on the back burner. He cracked eggs one-handed, the left hand, because the right hand held his phone 6 inches from his mouth. He was always dictating, notes for cases, reminders for his clerk, grocery lists for Diane that he narrated in a voice so serious his clerk once mistook a request for whole milk as a footnote to a Fourth Amendment opinion. The kitchen smelled like butter turning brown and the particular sweetness of vanilla extract meeting hot iron. Through the open window over the sink, a lawn sprinkler threw water in a slow arc that ticked against the glass with each pass. Solomon's bare feet stuck slightly to the tile floor because Amelia had spilled orange juice there Wednesday, and his cleaning had been, as Diane noted, judicial in ambition and inadequate in execution. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a gavel that Diane had bought as a joke and that Solomon had never removed, Amelia's drawings covered every available inch. She drew people, always people, in crayon portraits that were surprisingly accurate from the neck up and anatomically creative from the neck down. Each portrait was labeled in her handwriting. Judge Monroe, Miss Karen from school, the mailman with the big truck. And in the center, given more refrigerator space than any other, a portrait of Solomon in his robes, behind his bench, with the caption, "My daddy helps people be fair." Solomon Keene was a United States District Court judge, confirmed 4 years ago after 11 years as a federal prosecutor and 3 years in private practice before that. He had argued before the Fourth Circuit twice and written opinions cited in law school textbooks. His chambers occupied the 6th floor of the federal building downtown. His name was on a brass plate outside his courtroom door. 2 deputy United States Marshals rotated shifts outside that door every day he sat on the bench. At home, he made pancakes and submitted to the authority of Amelia's court. Amelia's court convened every Saturday at 7:30 on the front porch. Amelia sat in the big wicker chair with a wooden cooking spoon, and Solomon and Diane sat on either side as the court heard the week's disputes. What movie they would watch that night. Whether the backyard needed a tire swing or a rope swing. Whether Daddy was allowed to sing in the car when Amelia's friends were present. Amelia banged the spoon on the arm of the chair after each ruling. The sound carried across the lawn and into the street, a hollow wooden knock that the neighbors had been hearing for 3 years. Gerald Fenton, across the street, was already on his porch with coffee when court convened that morning. He was 58, silver-haired, with the posture of a man who had spent decades in boardrooms, where he set the agenda and had never quite left them. He waved at Solomon. Solomon waved back. Amelia waved with both hands and called out good morning across the street. Gerald looked at her, and his hand returned to the arm of his chair without answering. He turned back to his coffee. Solomon noticed. He always noticed. He filed it in the same interior cabinet where he kept every small asymmetry, every gesture that spoke one language to him and a different language to his daughter. He did not mention it. He put a pancake on Amelia's plate and said, "What is the first case on the docket this morning, Your Honor?" "The case of the missing purple sock," Amelia said, and banged the spoon. Diane appeared in the doorway with wet hair and a coffee mug that read, "Objection overruled." She was 41, a civil rights attorney at a firm downtown, with the specific energy of someone who had been awake since 5 and had already answered 8 emails before her shower. She kissed the top of Amelia's head, stole a piece of pancake from Solomon's plate, and sat down. "Your Honor," she said to Amelia, "I'd like to submit evidence that the purple sock is under the bathroom radiator." Motion accepted. Amelia banged the spoon twice. Solomon watched his daughter in the morning light. The way she held the spoon with authority. The way she leaned forward in the chair, feet not touching the ground, fully committed to the fiction that this porch was a courtroom and her word was law. She was 7. She believed the world could be fair because her father's job was making it so. By noon, the temperature had crossed 94 degrees, and the asphalt on Amherst Lane sent up a shimmer you could see from the front porch. Solomon packed the pool bag. Amelia's goggles, her mermaid book for the break between swims, sunscreen, 2 granola bars, a towel with dolphins on it. He left his wallet on the kitchen counter because the community pool was 4 blocks away, and he had been walking there without identification for 3 years. Diane was leaving for a client meeting downtown. She kissed Solomon at the door. "You're not Judge Keene today," she said. "You're Dad." "I am always Dad," he said. "Dad is the higher appointment." Amelia pulled him by the hand down the front steps. They swam for 2 hours. Solomon sat on the pool deck reading a brief on his phone, while Amelia practiced holding her breath underwater. She surfaced every 30 seconds to report her time, which she measured in Mississippi counts. 14 Mississippis, Daddy." Solomon said that was very impressive, and she went back under. His voice memo app was still running from a thought he dictated on the walk over, something about an 8th Amendment case. The red recording dot pulsed quietly on his screen. They left at 2:15. Amelia was on his shoulders again, her wet hair dripping onto his neck, the pool bag hanging from his right hand. She was singing a song she had invented, something about a fish who wore a robe and made the ocean follow rules. Solomon was laughing, the sun pressed into his shoulders. The concrete was hot enough that he could feel it through his sandals. 3 blocks from home, the patrol car appeared from a side street and matched his pace. The window came down. "Afternoon. Where you headed?" Solomon looked at the officer. Young, early 30s, with a pressed uniform and a face that had already decided something before the window finished rolling down. The nameplate read, "Hollister." "My home," Solomon said. He pointed. 3 houses that direction. "You live on Amherst?" "I do." "Can I see some ID? I walked to the pool with my daughter. I don't have it on me." Officer Bryce Hollister looked at Solomon, then at Amelia on his shoulders, then at the pool bag, then back at Solomon. His eyes measured something that had nothing to do with identification. "I'm going to need you to stop walking for a minute." Solomon set Amelia down gently on the sidewalk. "Stand right here, sweetheart." His voice did not change register. She held his hand and looked up at the officer with the open curiosity of a child who had not yet learned what a traffic stop meant for a man who looked like her father. "What's your name?" "Solomon Keene." "Spell it." He spelled it. "Spell it again, slower." Solomon spelled it again. Amelia tugged his hand. He squeezed once, a signal they had used since she was 4. It meant patience. "You say you live on this street?" "I live at 412 Amherst Lane, the gray house with the blue door. My wife and I have owned it for 4 years. Hollister reached for his radio. "I've got a male, approximately 6'1", no ID, claiming to be a resident on Amherst, requesting second unit. A second patrol car arrived within 3 minutes, then a third. 6 officers now on a residential sidewalk at 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon for a man holding a child's pool bag. Across the street, Gerald Fenton stood on his porch. He was watching. His phone was in his hand, held low at his side. He did not come closer. He did not call out. He watched the way a man watches something he ordered arrive on time. Hollister stepped out of his car. "Sir, I'm going to need you to set your daughter down and step over to the vehicle. My daughter is 7 years old. I'm not leaving her standing alone on a sidewalk." "That's not my concern right now. Step to the vehicle." Solomon knelt to Amelia's height. "Go sit on Mrs. Fleming's steps, okay?" He pointed to the house 2 doors from their own, where Dora Fleming, 72, retired schoolteacher, was already opening her screen door with the expression of a woman who recognized every piece of what she was watching. "I'll be right there." "Why, Daddy?" "Because the officer needs to talk to me for a minute." "It's okay." It was not okay. Solomon knew it. Amelia, who had studied her father's face every day of her conscious life and could read his mood from the way he held his coffee mug, knew it too. She walked to Dora's steps and sat. Her feet did not reach the ground. Hollister directed Solomon to the hood of the cruiser. The metal had been collecting June's sun for hours. Solomon placed his hands flat, and the heat bit through his palms like a reprimand. He kept them there. Behind him, Hollister's hands moved down his sides, across the pockets of his swim trunks, along the hem of his soaked T-shirt. There was nothing to find. The man was wearing swimwear and carrying a children's book. Hollister patted him down anyway, methodically, with the slow attention of a performance that required an audience. Dora Fleming called from her porch. "Officer, that man is Judge Keene. He lives at 412, right there." Hollister did not turn. "Ma'am, I need you to return inside. This is an active stop." "It's not an active anything. I have known that man and his family for 4 years. A second officer stepped toward Dora's porch. "Ma'am, if you don't go back inside, I'll cite you for obstruction." Dora looked at Solomon. He gave her the smallest nod. She went inside, but she did not close her door all the way. Hollister pulled Solomon's hands behind his back. The handcuffs engaged with a sound that traveled down the street, a metallic report that reached Amelia 40 feet away. She stood up from Dora's steps. "Daddy!" "Stay there, Amelia, stay right there." "Daddy!" Her voice reached the register that opened every window on the block. A child calling for her father while he stood in handcuffs on the sidewalk in front of his own home in the neighborhood where she had learned to ride a bicycle. Hollister raised his voice so the gathering neighbors could hear. "Someone needs to come get this child before I have to make a call about her welfare." Solomon's body went still. Not from anything that had a name. From the specific, calculated effort of a man who understood that if he moved, if he raised his voice, if he did anything other than stand perfectly motionless on this sidewalk in handcuffs in wet swim trunks, while an officer threatened to remove his daughter from his custody, every assumption that had led to these handcuffs would be confirmed in the report. He focused on the concrete. He counted the squares. He counted them because his daughter was watching, and the image she would carry for the rest of her life was being constructed in real time. And the only thing he could control was whether that image showed her father keeping himself intact when the world tried to take everything. "My wife's number is 555-0187, Solomon said. "Call her. She will confirm my identity and she will come get our daughter." "This isn't a phone booth." Philip Odom, 64, retired attorney, 3 houses east, appeared on his porch, holding his phone at waist level. The red recording light was on. A second officer glanced at him, and Philip angled the phone downward, but his thumb stayed on the screen. He kept recording from behind the porch railing, the lens catching everything through the gaps between the balusters. Hollister unzipped Solomon's pool bag and removed each item one at a time. The mermaid book. He turned it over and examined the binding. The sunscreen. He read the label front and back. The green goggles. He held them up and turned them in the light, inspecting the lenses as though a 7-year-old's swim goggles might contain something worth finding. The remaining granola bar. He unwrapped it, looked at it, set it on the hood of the car. Solomon watched his daughter's possessions handled by a man who did not know her name and said nothing. "We're going to take a ride to the precinct to sort this out," Hollister said. "My daughter cannot be left alone on this sidewalk." "That's not my problem, sir." Hollister opened the back door of the cruiser. Solomon looked at his house. 80 feet. His front door. His wallet on the counter. His judicial robes in the upstairs closet. His brass nameplate on the 6th floor of the federal building. And he was being folded into the back of a squad car in wet swim trunks, because a man across the street had made a phone call, and a young officer had finished a sentence about him before Solomon opened his mouth to begin one. The back seat vinyl had been baking in direct sun. Solomon sat and felt the heat soak through the thin fabric of his shorts. Through the window, he could see Amelia. Dora Fleming had come back outside and was holding the girl's hand on the porch steps. Amelia was reaching toward the cruiser with her free arm extended, fingers spread wide, trying to touch a car she could not reach. On his porch, Gerald Fenton tilted back the last of his coffee. Diane Keene was 7 minutes into her client meeting when her phone buzzed. A text from Philip Odom. "Soul in handcuffs outside your house. Amelia on sidewalk. 3 cruisers." She read the message twice. She placed both hands flat on the conference table, a gesture Solomon would have recognized as the one she used before closing arguments. She excused herself. In the hallway, she opened her contacts and pressed the number labeled C. Wells. Deputy United States Marshal Christina Wells answered on the second ring. "There is a patrol officer on Amherst Lane with my husband in the back of his cruiser," Diane said. "Solomon is a sitting federal judge. Our daughter is 7 years old, and she is standing on a sidewalk with a neighbor. I need you there." Christina Wells was already reaching for her keys. She had been a deputy marshal for 16 years. She had protected federal judges through bomb threats, stalking cases, and credible assassination plots. 5 years ago, she had buried her younger brother, Dion, a 29-year-old physical therapist pulled over for a broken taillight in a jurisdiction where the dashcam footage arrived 3 months late and showed nothing consistent with the officer's report. She did not protect federal judges because it was her assignment. She protected them because she understood what happened when the space between a badge and a man's body was filled with assumptions instead of law. "I'm 10 minutes out," Christina said. "Dispatching 2 units now." Christina. "Yes." She watched them put her father in the car. "I'm coming. 7 minutes." Solomon sat in the back of the cruiser. The vinyl seat burned through his shorts. He could hear Amelia outside, her crying now reduced to the hiccuping rhythm that comes after the screaming stops. the sound of a child's body trying to regulate itself after an experience her nervous system was not designed to absorb. He looked at the ceiling. He read the initials someone had scratched into the plastic partition. DLW. He wondered who they were. He wondered if they had a daughter standing on a sidewalk somewhere. In the front seat, Hollister was running Solomon's name through the database. Solomon watched through the partition. He could see the screen at an angle, the results loading, and he knew what was about to appear because his judicial appointment was a matter of public record. And in approximately 15 seconds, the name Solomon Keene was going to return information that would restructure this officer's understanding of the last 22 minutes. He watched Hollister's scrolling hand stop. He watched the officer's fingers lift from the keyboard. He watched Hollister turn slowly and look through the partition with an expression Solomon had seen hundreds of times from his bench. The specific face of a person who has just heard evidence they cannot explain away. Before Hollister could form a word, 3 black SUVs turned onto Amherst Lane. They came in formation, evenly spaced, moving at a speed that was not urgent and not casual, but was the exact velocity that communicated to everyone watching that the people inside these vehicles were accustomed to arriving at places where the outcome was about to change. The first SUV positioned itself bumper to bumper in front of the cruiser. The second pulled alongside, blocking the driver's door. The third parked directly behind, close enough that Hollister could not have backed up without collision. His cruiser was sealed. Christina Wells stepped out of the lead vehicle. She was 6 feet tall in flat shoes, and she walked toward Hollister's door with a stride that had calculated the distance, the angle, and every consequence of the next 60 seconds before her foot touched the pavement. Her badge was in her hand. "My Deputy United States Marshal Christina Wells. You have United States District Court Judge Solomon Keene in custody in the back of your vehicle. Remove the handcuffs. Now." Hollister's door opened slowly. He stood. His mouth worked around sounds that did not become words. I was responding to a call. I didn't know. The handcuffs, now." He walked to the rear door. He opened it. He reached for Solomon's wrists. The cuffs released with a click that carried differently than the click of their closing, the way all sounds carry differently when the weight of a street has shifted from one side to the other. Solomon stepped out. He did not look at Hollister. He walked past the SUVs, past the officers standing beside their cruisers in the particular silence of men who were already composing their reports. And he walked to where Amelia sat on Dora Fleming's porch steps, with tears still wet on her face and her arms reaching for him. He knelt. She grabbed his neck. She held on with the entire force of a body that weighed 48 pounds and had just learned that the world could take her father from her in the time it took to walk home from a swimming pool. He placed one hand on the back of her head and the other flat between her shoulder blades and held her until the shaking in her ribs slowed to something that resembled breathing. "I told you I'd be right there," he said. She pressed her face into his shoulder and did not let go. On his porch across the street, Gerald Fenton stood motionless. His coffee cup was empty. His phone was still in his hand. He was watching the black SUVs, the marshals, the insignias on the doors that spelled federal in letters large enough to read from his railing. He went inside. His front door closed with a sound that no one on the street registered as important. It would become the most important door closing of his life. That was Saturday. What followed took 11 days. Diane filed the formal complaint Monday morning. By Wednesday, she had subpoenaed the body camera footage from Hollister's unit. Solomon recused himself from all matters related to the incident, but he sat at the kitchen table each night after Amelia fell asleep, reviewing records with the same attention he applied to every case that reached his bench. The body camera footage contained everything, every word. The order to spell his name twice. Every second of the pat-down of a man wearing pool clothes. The moment Hollister threatened to contact child services, while Amelia's voice came through the audio at a volume that made Diane leave the room the first time she heard it. The timestamp showed the stop lasted 22 minutes. 22 minutes during which a sitting federal judge was processed as a trespasser on his own street. But the footage held something else. When Hollister radioed dispatch, he used a code Solomon did not recognize. Diane pulled the dispatch logs. The code was an informal departmental tag used by officers assigned to specific neighborhoods to indicate that a stop originated from a resident complaint rather than observed behavior. Someone had called it in. The tag connected to a complaint logged at 2:09 that afternoon, 6 minutes before the cruiser appeared. The caller's number was registered to Gerald Fenton. Solomon had already known. Now he had it in writing. Philip Odom came to the house Thursday evening. He stood on the porch and handed Solomon a flash drive containing the video he had recorded through his porch railing. "I almost deleted it," he said. He would not look at Solomon directly. "After the officer told me to go inside, I went upstairs and filmed from the window ledge. I angled the phone so it looked like it was lying flat. I got the handcuffs, the SUVs, everything. Why did you almost delete it?" Philip looked across the street at Gerald Fenton's house. The porch light was off. "I've lived on this street for 15 years. I know what happens to people who make noise in a neighborhood like this. My wife and I came here to be comfortable. I'm not comfortable anymore." He paused. "But I watched that video 4 times, and each time I saw your daughter reaching for that car. What has it cost you?" Gerald called an emergency HOA board meeting for Monday. "The only agenda item is a $300 fine against me for," and I am quoting the language, "conducting unauthorized surveillance of community policing activities. My wife found an unsigned letter in our mailbox yesterday, telling us to remember who keeps this neighborhood safe." Solomon took the flash drive and held it in his palm. This small rectangle of plastic had cost a man his peace, and the man had handed it over anyway. On Friday evening, after Amelia was in bed, Diane spread papers across the kitchen table and told Solomon what she had found. Gerald Fenton had served as president of the Amherst Lane Homeowners Association for 9 years. In that time, he had filed 47 formal complaints. Diane had obtained the complete log: noise violations, parking violations, lawn maintenance, unauthorized exterior modifications, guest policy infractions. Each complaint was detailed, procedurally correct, and supported by photographs taken from Gerald's front porch. Every single one targeted a black homeowner. 47 complaints. 9 years. 0 complaints against any white resident in the same period. Diane turned the page. Property records showed that 14 black families had sold their homes on Amherst Lane or in the surrounding streets during Gerald's tenure as HOA president. Each family had an active complaint history with the association at the time of sale. Each home was purchased within 60 days of the family's departure by an entity called Amherst Holdings, LLC. The purchase prices were 15 to 25% below market value. The homes were renovated, resold at a 30 to 40% profit. Amherst Holdings, LLC was registered to 2 names: Gerald Fenton and his brother-in-law, Hugh Stratton, a real estate developer who operated out of an office 45 minutes south. Solomon sat with the documents. The individual grievance he had carried since Saturday, the handcuffs, the sidewalk, his daughter's voice, expanded into something larger and colder. This was not one officer's bad judgment. This was not one neighbor's prejudice. This was a machine. Gerald Fenton identified black families. The HOA complaints created pressure. The pressure drove sales. Amherst Holdings bought the properties at a discount, and when the complaints alone were not enough, Gerald called the police. Solomon looked at Diane. How many families? 14 confirmed. I'm still pulling records. The officer, Hollister, transferred to this district 4 months ago. Before that, he worked a precinct across the county with 11 excessive force complaints in 2 years, none sustained. Gerald requested him through the Neighborhood Association's contract with a private security consulting firm called Cornerstone Group. Cornerstone has an informal referral arrangement with the precinct. Gerald specifically asked for, and I quote from an email I obtained through public records, someone who takes community concerns seriously and follows through. Solomon read the email. The language was precise. It did not mention race. It did not need to. The word concerns did all the work. He thought about Dora Fleming, 72, who had come out to tell the officer who he was and had been threatened with obstruction for trying. He thought about Leon Ashford, 35, a software engineer 3 streets over, who Diane's research showed had been stopped by police while carrying boxes into his own home on moving day 6 months ago. He thought about the 14 families whose names he was now reading in a column beside purchase prices and resale figures. Families who had left their homes because a man across the street from Solomon had turned prejudice into a business model. He closed the folder. I want a hearing. The hearing convened 11 days after the Saturday on Amherst Lane, in a federal courtroom presided over by Judge Antonia Reeves, who had been assigned the case after Solomon's recusal. The gallery was full. Dora Fleming sat in the 3rd row in a blue dress she had not worn in 4 years. Philip Odom sat beside his wife, who held his hand on the armrest between them. Leon Ashford sat in the back with his arms crossed. 3 families who had moved away from Amherst Lane had returned for the morning. Solomon entered the courtroom in a dark suit. The last time most of the people in this room had seen him, he was in wet swim trunks on his knees. He walked to the complainant's table and sat without looking at the respondent's side of the room, where Bryce Hollister sat beside a union attorney, and Gerald Fenton sat 1 row behind them with a private lawyer who charged more per hour than Dora Fleming's pension paid per month. Judge Reeves called the proceedings to order. The room went quiet. Not the quiet of an empty space, but the quiet of a room holding its breath. Diane stood first. She placed a laptop on the evidence table and pressed play. The body camera footage ran for 22 minutes and 14 seconds. Nobody in the gallery moved for the first 5 minutes. By minute 8, when Hollister's voice came through the speakers ordering Solomon to place his hands on the hood, Dora Fleming folded her hands in her lap and stared at a point on the wall above the judge's head. By minute 14, when the audio captured Hollister telling the gathering neighbors that someone needed to collect this child before he made a welfare call, Leon Ashford stood up in the back row, walked to the end of his aisle, and stood against the wall because he could not sit still. By minute 19, when the sound of Amelia reaching for the cruiser came through the speakers, a woman in the 4th row who had moved away from Amherst Lane 2 years ago covered her mouth with her hand. Judge Reeves let the footage finish. Then she looked at Diane. Proceed. Diane placed Philip Odom's video on the screen. A different angle. Through porch railings. The quality was unsteady, the frame slightly tilted, but it showed what the body camera could not. Solomon's face during the pat-down. His expression as his daughter screamed. The perfect stillness of a man who was choosing, in real time, to hold himself together so his child would not see him break. Gerald Fenton, in the row behind Hollister, adjusted his tie. The movement was small, precise. The kind of adjustment a man makes when he is aware of being watched and wants to appear composed. His jaw was set. His eyes were fixed on the screen. His fingers found a crease in his trousers and pressed it flat. Running his thumb along the fabric in a repetitive motion, he did not seem to know he was performing. Diane paused the video. She turned to the dispatch records. She projected the complaint log on the courtroom screen. She read the 209 entry. Caller number, Gerald Fenton's registered line. Complaint, suspicious male, no identification, possible trespasser. Description, black male, 6 feet, walking with a minor child. She let the description sit on the screen. Then she displayed the HOA complaint records. All 47 entries. She organized them by target, and beside each name she placed a photograph from the county property records showing the eventual purchase by Amherst Holdings, LLC, and the resale price. The numbers told the story without narration. 14 families, 14 departures, 14 discounted purchases, 14 profitable resales. 9 years. Gerald Fenton's attorney requested a recess. Judge Reeves denied it. Diane projected the LLC registration. Gerald Fenton, Hugh Stratton. She showed the email to Cornerstone Group requesting an officer who would follow through. She showed Hollister's prior complaint record from his previous precinct. 11 excessive force complaints. 0 sustained. She showed the patrol assignment records confirming that Hollister had been specifically routed to the Amherst Lane neighborhood at Cornerstone's recommendation, which came at Gerald's request. Between each piece of evidence, the courtroom breathed. After the LLC documents, Gerald Fenton stopped adjusting his tie. His hand dropped to the arm of his chair and stayed there. After the email to Cornerstone, his attorney whispered something in his ear. Gerald did not respond. He was staring at the screen where his own words were displayed in a font large enough for the gallery to read. After the patrol assignment records, Hollister turned in his chair and looked at Gerald Fenton for the first time. The look lasted 4 seconds. It was the look of a man who had just understood that he was not the architect of what had happened on that sidewalk. He was the tool. Then Kyle Rennick took the stand. Officer Kyle Rennick, 28, had been Hollister's partner on the afternoon of the stop. He had been present for the pat-down, the handcuffs, the threat about Amelia. He had been the officer who told Dora Fleming to go inside. He sat in the witness chair in civilian clothes because he had submitted his resignation from the department that morning. Rennick did not look at Hollister. He looked at Judge Reeves. He confirmed the events of the afternoon. Then he said something the gallery was not prepared for. It wasn't the first time. He described 4 additional stops Hollister had conducted in the same neighborhood over the preceding 3 months. All originated from Gerald Fenton's complaint calls. All targeted black residents or visitors. One was Leon Ashford on his moving day. One was a 16-year-old boy walking to a friend's house who was detained for 15 minutes and sent home. One was a couple visiting the neighborhood to look at a house for sale who were followed by Hollister's cruiser until they left. "I was in the car for all 4 stops," Rennick said. "I knew they were wrong. I didn't say anything." "Why are you saying something now?" Diane asked. Rennick was quiet for a moment. He looked at the evidence table where the pool bag contents had been placed as exhibits. The mermaid book, the green goggles, the half-eaten granola bar. "Because I heard that little girl screaming and I didn't move. I stood on that sidewalk and I watched her reach for a car her father was locked inside and I did not move. I have a niece. She's 6. He stopped. "I don't know how to be the person who stood there and also be the person who picks my niece up from school." Judge Reeves reviewed the full body of evidence. She addressed Hollister directly, noting that the stop lacked reasonable suspicion. The detention violated Fourth Amendment protections, and the threat regarding the child constituted an abuse of authority that she characterized as targeted intimidation of a minor. She referred Hollister's conduct to the Department of Justice for a federal civil rights investigation. She addressed Gerald Fenton, She noted that the pattern of complaints, the LLC purchases, the coordinated use of law enforcement as a harassment tool, and the financial benefit derived from the displacement of black families constituted a potential violation of the Fair Housing Act and federal civil rights statutes. She referred the matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office and ordered Amherst Holdings LLC frozen pending investigation. She addressed the precinct. She ordered an external audit of the Cornerstone Group arrangement and all neighborhood patrol assignments made through informal referral. She recommended a consent decree requiring independent oversight of complaint-driven stops. Then she paused. She looked at Solomon, who had sat through the entire proceeding without speaking, without reacting, with the stillness of a man who spent his professional life on the other side of that bench, and understood that the power of a courtroom was not in its noise but in its record. "Judge Keene," she said, "is there anything you wish to add?" Solomon stood. He did not look at Hollister. He did not look at Gerald Fenton. He turned to the gallery. He found Dora Fleming in the third row. Dora, who had come out on her porch to say his name when no one else would, who had been told to go inside, who had held his daughter's hand while he sat in the back of a cruiser. He walked to the gallery rail. He reached across it and took Dora's hand. "You said my name when it mattered," he said. "I won't forget that." Dora held his hand with both of hers. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her grip said everything her voice did not. Hollister resigned before the department could terminate him. His sister, who he had been supporting financially since their parents died, stopped returning his calls after the hearing transcript became public. His name appeared in 3 federal filings within the month. He moved out of the area. His forwarding address led to a 1-bedroom apartment in a town where nobody knew his face, though the federal investigation would find him there too. Gerald Fenton's HOA presidency was stripped by emergency vote the day after the hearing. His brother-in-law, Hugh Stratton, withdrew from the LLC and released a statement claiming he was unaware of the targeting pattern, a claim that would not survive the discovery process. Gerald's wife moved to her sister's house upstate. His grandson's Little League team held a parent meeting. Gerald's name was not on the attendance list. The homes he had purchased through Amherst Holdings were frozen. 14 families received notification letters from the U.S. Attorney's Office inviting them to participate in the investigation. 9 responded within the first week. Kyle Rennick transferred to a precinct in a neighboring county. The Internal Affairs review would take months, but his testimony was entered into the federal record. He would carry what he had done and what he had failed to do in the same body for the rest of his career. He told a journalist 6 weeks later that he still heard the girl's voice when he sat in his cruiser and that he had started rolling down his windows so the sound of the street could drown it out. Dora Fleming returned to her garden the next morning. She had stopped planting in her front yard 2 years ago after being stopped on her own lawn by an officer responding to a noise complaint Gerald had filed about her wind chimes. The wind chimes had been a gift from her late husband. She had taken them down the day after the stop. The morning after the hearing, she hung them again. The sound carried across the street to where Gerald's porch sat empty. Leon Ashford filed his own formal complaint and received a written apology from the precinct commander. He framed it, not out of satisfaction, but as a record, evidence that something had changed, even if the thing that changed was only a piece of paper. Philip Odom received a notice from the HOA board that the fine for unauthorized surveillance had been rescinded. He read it at his kitchen table and set it next to the unsigned letter that had been in his mailbox. He kept both. He told Solomon he had finally started sleeping through the night, though he still locked his front door twice before bed, which he had never done before. Christina Wells returned to her rotation at the federal building. She updated the threat assessment protocol for judicial protection details to include incidents originating from civilian complaint abuse. The protocol change was adopted by the Marshal's Service Regional Office within 2 months. She did not speak publicly about the case. When a reporter called, she said, "I was doing my job." She did not mention Dion. She did not need to. Dion was in every protocol she ever wrote. Solomon worked with the county commission to establish an independent civilian review board for neighborhood policing complaints. The board's mandate included audit authority over private security arrangements and the power to review complaint patterns by demographic data. The first meeting was held in a community center 4 blocks from Amherst Lane. Dora Fleming attended. So did 3 of the families who had moved away. One of them was already in discussions with a realtor about returning. Amelia added a new drawing to the refrigerator. It showed her father standing on a sidewalk. Behind him, a police car. Around the police car, 3 black trucks. Above the trucks, a sun. She had written across the bottom in orange crayon, "Daddy came back." Solomon looked at it for a long time. He did not remove it. He did not add it to the center of the refrigerator where his robed portrait hung. He left it exactly where Amelia had placed it, at her eye level, where she could see it every time she opened the door for milk. Saturday morning. Solomon on the porch, Amelia beside him. The griddle cooling in the kitchen, the cast iron still ticking as it contracted. The wooden spoon in Amelia's hand. "Court is now in session," she announced. She banged the spoon twice. "What's on the docket, Your Honor?" Solomon asked. "The case of whether Daddy has to go back in the pool today." "And what is the court's ruling?" Amelia considered this with the gravity of a person who understood, perhaps more than she could articulate, that the rules mattered. That the system of this porch, the spoon, the chair, the Saturday ritual of hearing both sides and making a decision, was not a game. It was practice. It was the thing her father had spent his life building, and the thing the world had tested on a sidewalk 40 feet from where she now sat. "The court rules yes," she said, "but Daddy has to carry me the whole way." She banged the spoon. Court was adjourned. Solomon followed her down the steps, into the sun, down the sidewalk where 11 days ago she had reached for a car she could not touch. She was not reaching now. She was running ahead, turning back every few steps to make sure he was still there. And each time she turned, he raised his hand so she could see it. Open, steady, exactly where she expected it to be. She ran until the pool gate was in sight, and Solomon never once looked away. Have you ever had to stay calm when everything in your body told you to fight? Not for yourself. For someone small who was watching and learning what the world looks like from the way you stood inside it. What did it cost you? And what did the person watching learn from what you chose? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear the moment you held yourself together, because someone you loved needed to see you whole. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Share it with someone who carries that weight. Like this video so more people find it.